Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra, and I am the founder of Corporate Minority. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, Alysha Campbell, who is the founder of CultureShift HR. She joins us with over a decade of human resource management experience and has humbly agreed to join us and share some advice around diversity and inclusion. So, hey, Alysha, how are you doing today?
I'm so good, Sandra. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for joining us. We can jump right into this interview. So I know
Yeah.
you've done a lot in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, my career in HR did not start off in the HR space, surprisingly. I went to school for accounting.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, very night and day different, different industries. And when I graduated, we were still in the recession. I was looking for jobs and I was
Mhm.
really struggling to land my first kind of, corporate adult position. So I
Yeah.
went to a recruiting agency to see if they could kind of give me a hand in my job search. And they actually ended up turning around and offering me a job.
Nice.
So they were like, you have a great personality, you connect really well with people. Have you ever thought about being a recruiter? And I was like, at first in my mind, I was like, you know what? I did not just do 4 years of school to be a recruiter. Like, I want to be an accountant. But I was like, you know what? Everything happens for a reason. Let me give this a try. If I don't like it, I can always leave and, find something else. And I ended up loving it.
Nice.
Surprisingly, I was just really in tune with the people aspect. I love helping one person get from one job to another
Mhm.
because it then led to more opportunities for them. They were getting more money, they were moving up the corporate ladder, they were helping to further their career, and to be a part of that kind of pipeline, I just felt so fulfilled by that.
Nice.
And I'm a person that's very curious. I always want to learn more, I always want to dig deeper. And I got to a point where I was like, this is great, but like, what else? Like, because after they get placed in the job, like, I don't talk to them anymore. I don't know how they're doing. And then so I kept getting curious, like, what if I could see how they're doing in their role? What if I could help, get them more developed and help with their skill set and professional development and all that. And so my curiosity led me more and more into the HR space. And I grew into an HR manager, HR advisor positions with various companies. And then as I, got to a place in my career where I started to feel a little bit stuck, I was like, you know what? I want to go out on my own. And so I decided to start my own consultancy firm, which is CultureShift HR. And I started that in 2018. And with that, I work with small brands and businesses on how to optimize the talent that they have and really create diverse and inclusive workspaces for them, for their talent to excel. And so with that, it's definitely busy because I still do manage my full-time role and do my consultancy. So I'm doing double duty. But until, I can have a time where I can able to focus full-time on culture
Mhm.
shift, is I'm still learning myself, and I'm still able to still feed into myself as an HR practitioner and still be able to then grow and then feed that knowledge back into my clients and my brands that I work with. So it's been a pretty crazy journey, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Nice, nice. So when we look at, there's the term diversity and inclusion that's floating around lately.
Mhm.
What does it really mean to have a diverse and inclusive workforce? I'm sure you've kind of talked about that within your day job as well as Culture Shift HR. What does that look like? What is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because the phrases diversity and inclusion, or D&I, it's really transformed a lot actually. Like, some companies call it diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Some
Mhm.
call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now there's even racism, diversity, inclusion, equity. Like, it's really evolved into various into various acronyms. But at the core, diversity and inclusion is really two things. So one, it's not only just hiring more people of color, women, having intersectionality within your organization, but it's really understanding the power of having a diverse workforce and optimizing that within your business. And then where the inclusivity part comes in is really making a space where people can bring their authentic self to work, where they can feel like they're being included, where they feel like their voices are being heard, that their opinions matter, and that they have a seat at the table. So when you have those two things and you're creating and having a space where there's a balance of power within all these different areas, you're really creating that space of belonging for everyone. And so that's kind of where the belonging kind of term got tagged on to D&I. was because ultimately when you have a proper distribution of diversity, inclusion, and equity, with equity being how the elements of power are distributed equally among everybody, you're really creating a space where people feel like they can contribute and that their voice and impact matter. And so it's definitely an interesting concept, because when you look at the framework of diversity and inclusion, people really try to put it in a box and say, oh, it just belongs to HR, and they have this policy and that policy. But diversity and inclusion really is a whole corporate culture transformation. It starts off as something that is, it starts off very closed off and very like, okay, this is just going to sit in this corner. But for companies that are really doing D&I the right way, it starts off small, but it grows and it takes over the organization to the point that diversity and inclusion is the core of who they are. Wherever the decision they make is around diversity thinking, diversity results, thinking about how can we make our space more inclusive? How do we look at our suppliers? How do we look at our pipeline of talent, of our processes? Like, you can go so deep into the sphere of D&I. And so companies that have done it really well, it is not something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
It is a year, I would say years process. And that's always something that I tell a lot of the clients that I work with, is that, it's great that you are passionate about D&I and that you want to do so much, but you can't boil the whole ocean. You need to really understand what that roadmap looks like, build it with the right specialists, because this stuff can be overwhelming. There's a lot of, uncomfortable topics that you need to talk about within the D&I space, and then really plan for what that looks like, because you're really changing the way you look and deal within your business.
Nice. And you said, you just mentioned uncomfortable conversations, and this can be a sensitive topic for some people. So what are some practical steps that some businesses can do right now to create more diverse workforce? I know it's integrating it into their whole, business strategy, but are there other practical steps that, someone can take away from this video as to this is what we can do tomorrow? Because there are businesses that are looking for things to do, but there are also employees that are looking for things to suggest that businesses do.
Yeah, absolutely. My suggestion with anyone kind of starting their D&I journey is to start with what you're reasonably able to do. Because the worst thing you could do as a company is say you're going to do something for your employees and then turn around and not deliver. They are putting a lot of trust in you. They are putting a lot of faith in you to lead these initiatives. And if you let them down, that is sending a bigger signal than a lot of leaders may think. So I would say, before you even commit to anything, try to understand yourself. What is it that you can do within your organization, and what can you do within a reasonable timeline? What I've been finding within this space is that employees always want things now. We want this now. We want to do this now. But again, it's not as easy as flicking on a switch. Even if you think about hiring more diverse talent, just that one simple element, there's a lot of work that goes into that, because you have to look at your job descriptions to make sure that that the language is inclusive, that it's not having any bias within it. You then need to look at where you're posting your jobs. Where are you creating that pipeline of diverse talent? Are people that you want to be in this role, are they going to look at these sites or at these job postings? And 3, how are you asking the right questions when you're interviewing? It's great if you have a whole bunch of diverse talent in your pipeline, but if you're asking questions that can come across as intrusive or abrasive, you're going to, turn a lot of people away. So as you can see, it's a multi-tiered approach. It's not as easy as just hiring more people, but it's literally a retraining, it's a rethinking, it's a remodeling of how you look and see, one action or one task. So I would say setting that realistic expectation with your organization and letting them know what that process looks like, and that you're making strides towards it, is going to be very clear and very helpful in your success with initiating any types of change. Because again, if leadership and employees aren't on the same page and there's that wrong expectation, the employees are always going to feel dissatisfied. And then I think on the employee side, it's very important that you are an active advocate within your organization. So if you're not sure where to start, I would highly suggest anyone that's looking at this video, look at employee resource groups or affinity groups. Those are basically employee-led groups that connect and join together under a common theme or ideology. For example, one of my clients has, the Black employee resource group, or the Hispanic, or the women, or the females in tech. So you can have different types of employee resource groups that come and need to talk about policies, programs they want to see, education or trainings that they want to instill within the organization. And that can then also help drive a lot of change and a lot of initiative, and really be a great voice in making sure that holding your leadership and organization accountable.
Nice. In employee resource groups, ERGs, they're becoming more and more popular, especially when an organization is even mid-size and they can't, afford certain things. So having those advocates within the organization that are speaking up and keeping the companies accountable are very, very important. But, at the same time, a lot of employees that are starting these employee resource groups, they don't really know what it is and they don't really have the information. So what does a successful ERG actually look like? What success? How do they measure success?
No, that's a really great question. I would say it can be challenging at first when you're starting an ERG because there's so much to do and it can be overwhelming. And not only that, but you're trying to create something new, get it off the ground while still working your full-time job. So it's kind of like, it does take a little bit more, time and effort that you have to find either maybe after work or before work to kind of get things going. But I would say there are a lot of great resources that I can definitely share with you, Sandra, and your team for them to look at on how to start an employee resource group, how to set up different roles, how to make sure you're taking the right meeting minutes, how to get executive sponsorship, how to ensure that you're getting a budget created for your ERG, and how to partner with the right business units in your organization, like HR or the people team, to ensure that you are getting where you need to go and getting access to the information and data you need. I think for success and measuring it, I think, again, really being intentional on what you want to achieve and the timeline you want to achieve it is going to help you measure what that success looks like. Yeah. So for example, if you're working at a company where you don't have any diversity and inclusion policies or programs, maybe it's just about starting that policy. What is our policy stance on D&I? How do we have respect in the workplace? How do we acknowledge, diversity and creating inclusivity within the workforce? So it could be as simple as that, and that could be a metric of success. Or if you're more further along in the diversity and inclusion journey, maybe it's creating, a D&I committee that has executive sponsorship, a 5-figure budget, programming, executive speakers coming in, and, things of that nature. So I would say, do what's manageable for you and the team that you've created for your ERG, and really getting your team organized, I would say in and of itself is going to be a really great success, because where a lot of ERGs fall down is that they can't get organized within themselves. So there's going to be some people who will want to do a lot of work, and then there's going to be some who just want to participate when they have the time. Yeah. So really understanding who is going to be like managing operations, managing communications, managing events, managing the community, and what those roles and responsibilities are will help you bring a lot of clarity to how you execute the rest of your diversity and inclusion plan. And so that in and of itself can take a couple months to figure out, because everyone's going to have a voice, everyone's going to have an opinion. But it's important you get that sorted first, because as you get more busier and more work starts to get created, it's very easy for no one wanting to take the ball, because it's like, well, I didn't sign up for this, I don't want to do this. But if you get those things clarified beforehand, a lot of things can move a lot smoother as you move down and as you continue to grow, not only as an ERG, but with D&I in the business.
That makes sense. And there's also opportunities for ERGs to partner with other ERGs outside of their company as well. To host events and bring their budgets together and do things like that.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about that, or is there ways or resources available to do that, or is it just kind of reaching out to other companies to see if their ERGs are willing to collaborate?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And absolutely, ERGs can definitely do. For myself, when I was doing some research, sharing some content about ERGs, a lot of the tech companies have these groups. So like, for example, Twitter has the Blackbirds. Some of the names are escaping me right now. Oh, LinkedIn has Big, so BIG. They have, there's other companies that, also have other groups that are also well known. And so doing your research and finding what companies you want to work with, I think is really important, because you want to make sure that, if they're going to be in the same industry as you, what those synergies can be. And if they're not in the same industry or same scope, again, how can you help leverage each other? Is it sharing resources? Yeah. Like you said, is it doing an event together and then, splitting the budget? What is it that you're going to both fit and leverage from one another to then make sure that you're feeding into your own company and your own ERG as well. But I always think, better together. If you can do things, have a synergy and create bigger impact, then you're winning all around.
That makes sense. And what are some things the ERGs can do to position themselves as not being exclusive? So there are certain things that I've heard in the past where it's like, oh, this is a Black only group. Well, what about me? I'm Hispanic, but I want to be a part of this group. Are there things, or if you, researched that in the past, have you talked to groups about that topic in the past? How do we become inclusive within these ERGs?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I've heard that lots of times myself as well. And what's important to realize is although ERGs, employee resource groups are for a specific employee group or a category of employees, you could still have allies within that group. So for example, I know a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement becoming more and more vocal, it's so important that when people come forward who may not be people of color that are interested in supporting, that you work with them to have them see how they can, participate. So maybe they won't attend every meeting, maybe they won't be a part of that or kind of administrative group. Maybe they can help you plan an event. Maybe they can help you get your message out there for it. Maybe they can help, support by wearing your swag or promoting your events on Facebook or social media. So when other people outside of the group want to participate, make room for them to participate because they're your ally, can help support your message, they can help that you feel supported and have an extra hands when things get really busy, and also can give you some really good ideas. Yeah. So don't shy away from, hearing other people's and taking advice or getting help from other groups outside of the ERG, because that could be a great resource that you're not taking advantage of.
Okay, that makes sense. And are there any resources? I know you're going to share some, and we're going to share it on the site and social media as well. But are there any resources that come up top of mind that are available to minorities starting ERG groups?
Yeah, absolutely. There's again, I don't have the sites right in front of me, but there's a lot of resources and sites that talk about like what are ERGs, how to properly organize them, and how to kind of set up your hierarchy. So some groups like to be, more free flowing, and maybe just have one kind of leader, and others like to be very structured. So say you have a president, a VP, a treasurer, a secretary, someone over communications, director of events, and things like that. So they'll give you different models to kind of help give you some ideas and give you some pointers. There's also a really great group called Manifest that they are creating some really awesome content around ERGs, and they actually provide support to ERG groups to ensure that ERGs feel supported. So they're creating a playbook that allows ERGs to really understand how to successfully set them up, plus how to talk to your executive leadership team and get your sponsorship team in place so that you have that corporate backing for any that you do to be successful and to land right within the corporate space. So I'll definitely share all those things and more with you later.
Awesome. So then, I've had a couple of people ask around what questions can employees ask their HR team? So questions around employee turnover, promotions, the number of applicants that are coming in. Are there questions that employees can ask their HR teams, or should they shy away from asking questions like this?
I definitely think you should ask. I think it's the way that you ask will determine kind of the answer that you get. Yeah. So for example, if your HR lead knows that you're creating an employee resource group and you're trying to figure out, okay, how diverse is this organization? How many people do we have? Or how many women do we have, say, in leadership roles versus individual contributor roles, people of color in leadership roles versus, individual roles? They can pull that data for you so that you then know, okay, we want to increase, women of color in leadership roles by 5% in the next 3 years, as an example. And you can't make that metric or that goal without knowing that data. Yeah. But if you just go to HR and say, like, I want to know the numbers of, X, Y, Z, I'm an employee, I need to know this, you will more than likely get shut down. So I think it's really important they understand the why, because again, this data is sensitive. What we don't want as well is the data to be weaponized against the organization. Yeah. So again, understanding that why behind the ask is going to be really important. And then further to that, since you are asking information that's a bit more on the sensitive side, having that corporate sponsor with you, either CC'd on the email or even them making the request, will help and further your initiative as well. Because then they see, okay, this has been approved by someone senior in the organization. The HR will feel more safe and more comfortable giving out that kind of data than if it was just, say, maybe an employee just asking.
That makes sense. So I like to end these sessions with just getting some motivation. So what are some things that, keep you motivated and pushing forward with everything that's going on? We've got COVID. We've just got a lot going on this year. So are there any things that
Yes.
keep you motivated?
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite phrase to say is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Nice.
And for me, I love that because fine with myself, I'm constantly someone who needs to be achieving things, needs to be checking things off my to-do list. And so whenever I don't feel that, challenge, or I feel like, oh, this is getting too easy, I'm constantly kind of looking for that next thing, or how can I, push myself further in this. And so I realize when I do that, I grow, I'm, expanding as a person, I'm learning more. And that in that type of mind frame, I'm just really, really, happy. And I just have an overall, better demeanor about myself. So for me, it's like, when you're going through those hard times, when things are harder, that's okay. That means you're growing. That means you're going to come out of this being better, being smarter, being faster, more agile. And overall, that's good. So again, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And that's the space that you should be in.
Nice. And where can people find you if they're looking for you and they want more information? Social handles, website, where should people locate you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be found on Instagram at alysha.m.campbell. And that's the same for LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. My corporate site is cultureshifthr.com. And then my personal site, where you can hear my blogs, content, and all other great stuff, is alyshamcampbell.com.
Awesome. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us today. I really, really do appreciate all of the advice that you've given us. I want to just encourage everybody, visit Alysha's site, follow her on social media, get in touch with her. We get further together, so let's support one another in this journey of life. So thank you again for
Absolutely.
joining us. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Corporate Minority. Make sure you create your free user profile. We're going to be sharing a lot more information with you on a regular basis. Thank you again.